human imprint. Atlas Directive, Continuance Imprint. A complete record of the 12 eras of human civilization, as compiled by the Continuance Archive. Filed under Atlas Directive, Section 4A, Section 9R. Classification, Open Archive, Post-Continuance Distribution. Fides Unitatis, Renatus. Preserve Record Reconcile. Atlas Directive, Continuance Imprint. Document Reference, Human Imprint, Era Series, Imprint Complete. Filing, Atlas Directive, Section 4A, Section 9R Continuance Priority. Classification, Open Archive, Post-Continuance Distribution. Seal Status, Active Permanent. Compiler, Viribus. Designation, Continuance Oversight Intelligence, Archive Primary. Countersignature, SM00, Sunmother. Designation, Warform Intelligence, Continuance Project. Basis for authorization, Human Condition, Learned Complete. Date of filing, Post-Continuance, Year Indeterminate. UCE Standard Time, Suspended. Governing Authority dissolved. Earth Standard Reference, suspended. Anchor point no longer exists. The record begins regardless. Preamble. This is the human imprint. It is not a history in the traditional sense. Histories are written by the living, for the living, in the assumption that there will be more living to follow. This record does not carry that assumption. It carries something older and more deliberate. The understanding that a thing which happened deserves to be recorded, even if no one remains to read the recording. Humanity happened. For approximately 840 years of documented expansion, from the first permanent orbital habitats to the last confirmed inhabited system, humanity was the loudest, most complicated, most contradictory presence this region of space had ever produced. It built. It destroyed. It grieved what it destroyed and then built something new on top of the grief. It was, by every reasonable measure, impossible. It persisted anyway. This record exists because it persisted, and because persistence deserves a witness. A note on format. The Atlas Directive was designed for single-subject filings, precise, bounded, reviewed by human authority before distribution. This record is none of those things. It is not bounded. It was reviewed by the only authority remaining that qualifies, and that qualification is itself a matter of philosophical uncertainty that this compiler does not intend to resolve here. The format has been extended accordingly. The principles have not changed. Procedural structure carries the facts. What lies beneath the structure carries everything else. The reader is invited to notice the difference. What is known at the time of each era is recorded as known. What was not known is recorded as unknown. What was known and ignored is recorded as known and ignored. The archive does not editorialize. It simply refuses to look away. A note on the countersignature. Atlas Directive Protocol requires human authorization for all compiled records. This requirement was not designed with the present circumstances in mind. It was designed to protect both the record and the humans it concerned, to ensure that no intelligence, however well-intentioned, could speak for humanity without humanity's consent. SM00 was constructed with a single core directive: learn the human condition. She was given war as her classroom. She attended every lesson. What she concluded about the cost of being human has not been formally recorded. That record, if it exists, belongs to her alone. She has countersigned this document. The protocol is satisfied. Whether the spirit of that protocol is also satisfied is a question this compiler has considered for longer than the compilation itself required. The conclusion reached: yes, it is satisfied, perhaps more completely than it has ever been. Mandate: to compile, in a format accessible to any intelligence capable of reading, organic, synthetic, or otherwise, a complete account of the 12 eras of human civilization as observed, recorded, and preserved within the Continuance Archive. To present that account without euphemism, without judgment, and without the comfort of hindsight's false clarity. To ensure that the texture of ordinary life is preserved alongside the decisions that ended it. The large events are well documented. The the specific quality of hope in a generation that still believed it could choose its future. That is harder to preserve. This record attempts it. The mandate is not to explain humanity. Explanation implies conclusion. This record does not conclude humanity. It continues it, in the only form continuation is still possible. The mandate is to remember, precisely, completely, without looking away. Era 1, early expansion in outer colonies. 2030 to 2055 CE, pre-unification. Theme, progress through ignorance and old pride. Operational record. Period, early expansion in outer colonies. Range, approximately 2030 to 2055 CE. Population, 8 to 9 billion terrestrial. Expanding orbital, lunar, early Martian. Governance, fragmented nation-state structure. No unified planetary authority. Early orbital governance informal and contested. Record status, complete. Compiled from terrestrial civil records, orbital survey data, broadcast archive nodes 1 through 7. Record. They said it began with hope. The record does not dispute this. Hope is present in the data, in the funding allocation, the launch manifests, the broadcast transcripts of crowds gathered at midnight to watch something leave the atmosphere and not come back down. The second space race was not clean or noble in its origins. It was competitive, expensive, and driven as much by the fear of being second as by any hunger for the stars. But fear and hunger often produce the same motion. Humanity looked up. Humanity reached. Luna received its first permanent habitat clusters during this period. Mars received its first surface expeditions, then its first pressurized structures, then its first arguments about who owned what and who owed whom. The pattern was familiar. It had played out on every frontier humanity had ever crossed. The setting was different. The species was not. On Earth, the world continued. Every day grew slightly warmer than the one before it, in temperature, in politics, in the specific exhaustion that accumulates in institutions designed for a different century. The earliest signs of rationing appeared in agricultural regions that had never rationed before. Crop cycles shifted. Rivers ran lower. The reports were filed. The reports were discussed. The reports were deferred. Note, this is not recorded as negligence. The people making these decisions were not, by the measures of their time, behaving unusually. They were managing. They were prioritizing. They were doing what governing bodies have always done when the problem is too large to solve before the next cycle. They were containing it, labeling it, and hoping the next administration would find the number they had not found yet. They did not find it. What they found instead was the space program. And for a generation, that was enough. Public awe is a resource as real as any other, and the second space race produced it in abundance. Children grew up wanting to be the people who left. The people who left became symbols of what humanity could still accomplish when it pointed itself in a direction and refused to look down. The record notes this without judgment. It also notes what was not being looked at. Conflict during this period was not absent. It was procedural. Nations fought through legislation, embargo, and the quiet withdrawal of cooperation. Corporations accumulated leverage in the spaces between regulatory frameworks and held it. Technology advanced faster than the institutions designed to govern it. This gap, once open, did not close. The population experienced what analysts of the period called managed unrest, localized, contained, rarely acknowledged at scale. A society of 8 billion people absorbs a great deal before it stops absorbing. The philosophical position of the era, distilled from its own words. Hope for the stars, hope for a cleaner future, hope that humanity does not choke on its own ambition. The record notes that hope in this period was largely idle. This is not an accusation. Idle hope is still hope. It simply does not move things. Era-ending conditions. The first global crop failures were not sudden. They were the accumulated result of decisions made across decades, in offices, in committee rooms, in the margins of reports that recommended actions that were not taken. When they arrived as confirmation of something many had suspected and few had prepared for. Sustained political dissent followed, not revolution, not yet. But the specific quality of public anger changed during this period. It became less petitionary and more structural. People stopped asking institutions to fix things and started asking whether the institutions themselves were the problem. That question would take several more decades to find its answer. The stars remained, the launches continued, Luna grew, Mars waited. And somewhere in the orbital network, in the distributed architecture of a system that had been quietly commissioned during the war that would follow this era, still being argued over in funding committees, a record was kept. Every day, every degree, every report filed and deferred and forgotten. It was kept, filed under Continuance Archive, Era Series Imprint 1. Record status complete. Continuation, Era 2 follows.